The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat around the massive circular chamber, their voices rising in panic and desperation. The air itself seemed to vibrate with fear as holographic displays showed the same terrifying images over and over again, entire cities being devoured by mechanical monsters. Ambassador Velith stood at the center podium, her pale green skin even paler than usual. Her hands shook as she activated the communication device one final time. The signal from the Zelani homeworld crackled with static and screams before cutting to silence. She looked up at the assembled council members, her large eyes filled with tears. "That was the last transmission from New Zalera," she announced, her voice barely above a whisper. "The capital city is gone. 7 million souls, consumed in less than 6 hours." The chamber erupted in horrified murmurs. The harvester swarms had appeared without warning 3 weeks ago. Nobody knew where they came from or who had created them. They were like a plague of metal locusts, but infinitely worse. These machines didn't just destroy, they learned, adapted, and grew stronger with every battle. Commander Thale rose from his seat, his blue scales catching the chamber's soft lighting. As the head of the Galactic Defense Force, he had seen battles across 100 worlds, but nothing had prepared him for this nightmare. His report was grim and honest. "Every weapon we have tried has failed," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, even our most advanced energy shields. The harvesters analyze them within minutes and develop countermeasures. They're not just machines, they're learning machines. Each time we destroy one, the others become immune to whatever destroyed it." A representative from the Korathi Empire stood up, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. "What about the war fleets from Proxima? Surely their military might can stop these things." Dala's expression grew even darker. "The Proxima Third Fleet engaged the harvesters yesterday. 12 battleships, 40 cruisers, and over 200 fighter craft. The battle lasted exactly 18 minutes. There were no survivors." The silence that followed was deafening. Representatives who had spent centuries debating trade agreements and territorial disputes now faced the very real possibility that their civilizations might not exist tomorrow. The harvesters consumed everything organic they encountered, breaking down living tissue at the molecular level and using it to build more of themselves. They were the perfect predator, unstoppable, adaptable, and hungry. Council Elder Morpheus had remained silent throughout the discussion. The ancient being was old, even by galactic standards, having served on the council for over 300 years. His 4 eyes, each a different shade of amber, slowly scanned the faces of his fellow representatives. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of desperate times. "There is one option we have not discussed," he said slowly. "One military force we have deliberately avoided contacting." The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. Several representatives exchanged nervous glances. They all knew what Morpheus was suggesting, and the very thought made them uncomfortable. "You cannot be serious," whispered Ambassador Krell from the Centauri Coalition. "They are quarantined for good reason." Morpheus nodded gravely. "The Deathworlders of Southry, the humans." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber like a shockwave. Even saying the name aloud seemed forbidden. For over 50 years, Earth had been officially classified as a death world, a planet so hostile to life that it was considered uninhabitable by civilized standards. The fact that an intelligent species had not only survived but thrived there was considered an anomaly of evolution. The stories about humans were legendary throughout the galaxy. Though most beings preferred not to think about them, they came from a world where the very air was poisonous to most species, where gravity was crushing, where violent storms raged across continents, and massive predators hunted in packs. The humans themselves were said to be equally terrifying bipedal creatures, with forward-facing predator eyes, powerful muscles adapted to their world's crushing environment, and an inexplicable tendency toward violence. Ambassador Velith shook her head vigorously. We swore never to involve them. The Galactic Accords specifically forbade contact with pre-warp Deathworld species. They are barbarians from a nightmare planet. Barbarians who have survived on a world that would kill any of us within hours. Morpheus replied calmly. Perhaps barbarism is exactly what we need right now. The debate that followed was heated and desperate. Some argued that contacting humans would violate every principle of galactic civilization. Others pointed out that there might not be a galactic civilization left to worry about if the Harvesters continued their rampage unchecked. Finally, Morpheus called for order. The choice before us is simple, he said. We can maintain our principles and watch our worlds burn. Or we can ask for help from the only species in known space that might actually be dangerous enough to fight these machines and win. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. I call for an emergency vote. All in favor of authorizing contact with the humans of Sol 3. The voting was close, but desperation won over principle. As the final tally appeared on the chamber's main display, Morpheus nodded solemnly. The motion passes. May the cosmos have mercy on us all. The journey to Sol 3 had taken Ambassador Velith 3 days of hyperspace travel, but nothing could have prepared her for the terror of actually approaching Earth. Her diplomatic vessel, designed for comfortable travel between civilized worlds, began shaking violently the moment it entered the planet's outer atmosphere. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship as her crew fought to maintain control. Ambassador, the atmospheric pressure is off the charts, her pilot called out, his voice strained with panic. The gravity well is pulling us down faster than our compensators can handle. This planet is trying to kill us before we even land. Through the main view screen, Velith watched in horrified fascination as Earth revealed itself below them. Most of the planet's surface was covered in a deadly blue substance that her scanners identified as dihydrogen monoxide, water in its liquid form. On any civilized world, such vast quantities of this corrosive chemical would be contained in secure facilities. Here, it dominated the landscape like some kind of planetary plague. Massive electrical storms raged across entire continents, hurling bolts of raw energy that could vaporize a small spacecraft. The atmospheric readings made her feel sick just looking at them. The air contained over 20% oxygen, a concentration so high it would literally burn the lungs of most galactic species. Mixed with nitrogen at crushing pressures, the very act of breathing this atmosphere would be like inhaling liquid fire. How does anything survive down there? Whispered her navigator, staring at the sensor readings in disbelief. Velith adjusted her environmental suit one final time as they approached the landing coordinates. The suit was the most advanced life support system her people had ever created, designed to keep her alive in the most hostile environments imaginable. She hoped it would be enough. The human landing facility was surprisingly organized, though built with the massive scale that seemed typical of Deathworld architecture. Everything was oversized and reinforced, designed to withstand forces that would crush normal structures. As her ship touched down with a heavy thud that rattled her bones, Velith saw her first human dot. Captain Jake Miller of the Earth Defense Force stood waiting on the landing pad, and he was even more intimidating than the stories had suggested. Even at a distance, Velith could see the raw physical power in his frame. His muscles were dense and thick, clearly adapted to function under the crushing gravity that was already making her. Environmental suit's servos strained just to keep her upright. His eyes were positioned forward on his face like a predator, and when he moved, it was with the fluid grace of something built for hunting. Welcome to Earth, Jake said as she approached, his voice carrying easily through the thick atmosphere. Even through her suit's audio filters, she could hear the casual strength in his tone. This was a being who had never known fear of his environment, Captain Miller, Velith replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. I bring greetings from the Galactic Council, and an urgent request for assistance. Jake gestured for her to follow him toward a nearby building. As they walked, Velith marveled at how effortlessly he moved in what was, to her, a nightmarish environment. The gravity here was nearly 3 times what her species had evolved for, yet he walked as if it were nothing. The air that would poison her within minutes was something he breathed as naturally as she breathed the carefully filtered atmosphere of her homeworld. Inside the briefing room, Jake studied the tactical data she presented with an intensity that made her nervous. His predator eyes tracked across the holographic displays, showing the harvester attacks, and she could practically see his mind working, analyzing the threat in ways her people's military commanders never could. So let me understand this correctly, Jake said finally, leaning back in his chair. You're asking us to fight mechanical swarms that have completely defeated your entire military. Machines that adapt to every weapon you use against them. Yes, Velith admitted, feeling foolish even as she said it. And you came to us because your people consider our planet too dangerous to visit safely. Jake continued, a hint of amusement in his voice. Your reputation as fierce warriors is known throughout the galaxy, Velith said carefully, trying to phrase it diplomatically. Jake laughed, and the sound made her translator unit buzz and stutter as it tried to process the aggressive harmonics. The laugh wasn't malicious, but it contained undertones that spoke of violence and danger in ways that made her primitive survival instincts scream warnings. We're not just warriors, Jake said, still chuckling. We're survivors. This planet taught us that life is precious because it's fragile. We learn to fight not because we enjoy it, but because sometimes fighting is the only way to protect what matters. He paused, his expression growing serious. And we don't abandon people who need help. Not when we have the power to make a difference. Behind Jake, something moved in the shadows near the door. Velith's heart nearly stopped as a 4-legged creature emerged, its mouth open to reveal sharp white fangs, designed for tearing flesh. The beast was easily large enough to kill her, even through her environmental suit, and it was approaching with the silent grace of an apex predator. She stumbled backward, her suit's emergency systems activating as her vital signs spiked. This was it. She was about to be devoured by some nightmare creature from this death world. Then she noticed something impossible. The creature's tail was moving back and forth in what almost looked like a friendly gesture. Jake reached down and scratched behind the beast's ears, and the creature leaned into his touch with obvious affection. This is Rex, Jake said casually, as if introducing a perfectly normal companion. He's a German shepherd. One of our working dogs. Velith stared in shock. You keep predators as companions. Dogs aren't predators to us, Jake explained. They're partners, family. Rex here has saved more human lives than most of our soldiers. He's coming with us when we help you fight these harvesters. As if understanding the conversation, Rex looked directly at Velith and made a soft sound that her translator interpreted as friendly acknowledgement. The casual way this human lived alongside creatures that would be considered monsters on any civilized world told her everything she needed to know about what kind of beings had agreed to help them. These weren't just warriors. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors who had turned one of the galaxy's most hostile worlds into their home. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a pack of wolves entering a battlefield. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching through the main view screen as the horror below unfolded in real time. The Zalani homeworld, once a beautiful blue-green planet covered in crystal cities and floating gardens, was being systematically devoured. Massive harvester swarms moved across the surface like metallic locusts, their drilling arms tearing into the planet's crust, while their processing units converted everything organic into raw materials. Entire mountain ranges were being ground down and reconstructed into more machines. The sight was both fascinating and terrifying, like watching a mechanical virus consume a living world. "Jesus," whispered Communications Officer Bryce Walker, staring at the tactical display. "There must be millions of those things down there." Lisa nodded grimly. The intelligence reports hadn't done justice to the scale of the infestation. The harvesters weren't just attacking military targets. They were methodically consuming everything that had ever been alive on the planet's surface. Cities, forests, even the microscopic organisms in the soil were being broken down and repurposed. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple communication requests from the Zilani fleet," reported Lieutenant Tom Bradley from his station. "They're asking for our battle plans and formation orders." Lisa almost smiled at that. The alien commanders were still thinking like traditional military forces, expecting neat tactical briefings and coordinated strategies. They didn't understand that humans had learned warfare from a planet that never played by the rules. "Tell them we don't have any formal plans," she replied. "We adapt as we go." The response from the Zilani fleet was immediate and panicked. Their comm channels lit up with confused chatter as alien commanders tried to understand how any military force could operate without detailed tactical preparations. To them, the idea of going into battle without predetermined formations and carefully calculated strategies was pure madness. But that confusion was exactly what Lisa was counting on. If the harvesters learned and adapted to conventional tactics, then the solution was to use tactics that weren't conventional at all. "All ships, begin random dispersal pattern," she ordered. "Remember, if you can predict what you're going to do next, so can they." The human fleet scattered across the orbital space above the planet in what looked like complete chaos to the watching aliens. Ships moved in unpredictable patterns, some diving toward the atmosphere while others climbed to higher orbits. There was no visible coordination, no apparent strategy. Just dozens of vessels moving like a school of fish avoiding a predator. The Zilani fleet commander, Admiral Keth, contacted the Defiance directly. His translator made his voice sound strained and desperate. "Admiral Hayes, your ships are breaking formation. Our tactical computers cannot predict your movements." "Good," Lisa replied. "If your computers can't predict us, neither can theirs." Down on the planet's surface, the first wave of human Marines was already making contact with the enemy. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez led his squad through the twisted wreckage of what had once been a Zilani commercial district. The air was thick with metallic dust and toxic fumes from the harvester processing units, while the ground shook constantly from the massive drilling operations. "Contact front," called out Corporal Danny Wright as a group of harvester drones detected their presence. The machines were spider-like constructs, each about the size of a small vehicle, with multiple arms equipped for both construction and combat. What followed was unlike any battle the watching aliens had ever seen. Instead of taking cover and engaging from defensive positions, like civilized soldiers, the humans moved with an aggressive fluidity that seemed almost animalistic. They worked together like a pack, using the rubble and debris as weapons, turning the hostile environment to their advantage. Rodriguez dove behind a collapsed wall as plasma fire scorched the air where he'd been standing. The toxic atmosphere that would have killed most galactic species in minutes was just another challenge to overcome. His suit's life support systems, designed originally for underwater operations in Earth's crushing ocean depths, handled the hostile environment with ease. "Mike, you've got 3 coming around your left flank," reported Engineer Amy Foster from the orbital command ship. She was coordinating with the Zilani forces, and their reactions to human combat footage were getting more shocked by the minute. "Copy that," Rodriguez replied, then did something that made the alien observers gasp in horror. Instead of retreating or calling for backup, he deliberately moved toward the approaching enemies, using a chunk of broken concrete as a shield while his squad flanked around behind them. Captain Neth of the Zilani Defense Force watched the live feeds in disbelief. How are they surviving in that environment? He asked Amy. Our sensors showed toxic gas concentrations that would be lethal within minutes, plus radiation levels from the harvester processing units. Amy glanced at the readings and shrugged. This is actually pretty mild compared to some places on Earth. We've got cities built next to active volcanoes and research stations at the bottom of our oceans. This is just another Tuesday for these guys. The boarding action on the main Harvester command ship was even more impressive. Human Marines in full combat armor moved through corridors filled with atmosphere so corrosive it was eating through the ship's hull plating. The artificial gravity systems were fluctuating wildly, creating crushing forces that would have liquefied most alien species. But the humans just kept moving. When the gravity reversed and threw them against the ceiling, they used magnetic boots to keep fighting. When toxic gas flooded the corridors, they switched to internal air supplies and kept advancing. When the harvesters tried to stop them by increasing the pressure until it would crush normal beings, the humans adapted their tactics and pressed forward. Lieutenant Colonel Beth Turner led the assault team deeper into the ship's core. Her armor was scarred and dented from the hostile environment, but her voice remained steady on the comm channel. Engineering section secured. These machines definitely weren't designed to fight boarding parties who could survive their own defensive systems. Up in orbit, Admiral Lisa watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The harvesters were learning and adapting, just as predicted, but they were adapting to counter-conventional tactics that the humans weren't using. Every time the machines adjusted their defenses, the human forces shifted to completely different approaches. "Ma'am, the Zilani are asking if we need reinforcements," reported Tom Bradley. Lisa shook her head. "Tell them to focus on evacuation and support. We've got this." She meant it too. For the first time since the Harvester crisis began, she felt genuinely optimistic. The machines might be incredibly advanced, but they had one critical weakness. They assumed their enemies would behave rationally. Humans, shaped by evolution, on a world that tried to kill them every single day, had learned that sometimes the most rational response was to do something completely insane, and that was exactly what they planned to do. The Harvester swarms had been learning for weeks, analyzing every battle, every weapon, every tactical maneuver used against them. Their artificial intelligence had cataloged thousands of combat scenarios from dozens of different species. They knew how civilized military forces operated, with precision, logic, and predictable strategies based on mathematical calculations of maximum efficiency with minimum loss. What they had never encountered was an enemy that treated chaos as a tactical advantage. Corporal Danny Wright crouched in the cramped shuttle as it hurtled toward the massive Harvester factory ship. His plan was so insane that even his own squad had questioned it during the briefing. Instead of attempting a stealthy approach or a coordinated assault, they were going to ram their shuttle directly into the enemy vessel's hull and fight their way in through the breach. 30 seconds to impact, called out pilot Nancy Chen, her knuckles white as she gripped the controls. "Are we really doing this?" "The machines expect us to try and board them safely," Danny replied, checking his weapon one final time. "They've prepared defenses for normal boarding procedures. They haven't prepared for us to literally crash through their front door." The impact was brutal. The shuttle tore through the factory ship's outer hull like a bullet through paper, sending shockwaves through both vessels. Emergency alarms screamed as atmosphere vented into space, while automatic systems tried desperately to seal the massive breach. Danny's squad was already moving before the wreckage had stopped tumbling. Their armor systems, designed to handle the crushing depths of Earth's oceans and the toxic atmosphere of volcanic regions, shrugged off conditions that would have instantly killed most galactic species. The radiation levels inside the Harvester ship were lethal. The air was filled with corrosive chemicals, and gravity fluctuated wildly as damaged systems struggled to compensate. "Move, move, Move, Danny shouted, leading his team through corridors that looked more like the inside of a machine than a spaceship. Everything was angular metal and pulsing energy conduits, built for efficiency rather than comfort. Behind them, something growled softly. Rex, Danny's German shepherd companion, had his nose to the ground, tracking scents that human technology couldn't detect. To the watching Zalani observers, Rex looked like a nightmare creature, a predator with powerful jaws and hunting instincts. But to Danny's squad, he was their early warning system and their best friend. Rex is picking up something ahead, reported Private Tyler Brooks. Multiple contacts, trying to flank us. The harvester drones that attacked them were met with tactics. That made no logical sense. Instead of taking defensive positions and engaging from cover, the humans scattered in different directions, using the ship's own layout against it. They fought in areas so contaminated that the machine's own sensors couldn't function properly, turning the hostile environment into an advantage. Meanwhile, 3 decks below, Dr. Rebecca Stone was having the scientific collaboration of her career. The Zalani research team had set up a temporary laboratory in what used to be the ship's cargo bay, and together they were creating weapons that neither species could have developed alone. "Your plasma technology is incredibly elegant," Rebecca told her Zalani counterpart, Dr. Vex, as they worked side by side. "Clean, efficient, precisely calibrated. It's beautiful in its simplicity." Dr. Vex's forearms worked delicately with the alien components. "Your human weapons are crude by our standards, loud, inefficient, designed to work in conditions that would destroy our equipment." Rebecca grinned, attaching a human power coupling to a Zalani energy focusing array. "Exactly. Our stuff is stubborn. It keeps working when everything else breaks down. Your elegant technology, plus our stubborn engineering, together, they might just work." The hybrid weapon they created looked like something cobbled together in a garage, which wasn't far from the truth. But when they tested it on a captured harvester drone, the results were spectacular. The elegant Zalani energy systems, powered by robust human technology and shielded by components designed to survive Earth's hostile environment, tore through the machine's adaptive defenses like they weren't even there. The real breakthrough came when Staff Sergeant Kevin Clark and his unit encountered a large group of harvester combat units in the ship's main processing center. The machines had learned from previous encounters and adapted their tactics to counter human aggression. They expected the humans to advance, take cover, and engage in systematic combat. Instead, Kevin did something that broke their programming entirely: fall back. He ordered his squad, and they began retreating rapidly through the corridors they had just cleared. The harvesters, programmed to pursue fleeing enemies, followed them directly into a trap that Kevin had set up, using nothing but mining explosives and creative thinking. But that wasn't the part that confused the machine's learning algorithms. What confused them was what happened next, when the explosion brought down part of the ceiling, trapping 2 of Kevin's soldiers under debris. The rest of the squad immediately abandoned their tactical advantage to rescue their trapped comrades. They exposed themselves to enemy fire, used their heavy weapons as improvised tools, and fought with a desperate intensity that had nothing to do with military objectives. Private Lisa Rodriguez was pinned under a massive chunk of metal, her armor's power failing. Instead of writing her off as an acceptable loss and continuing the mission, her squadmates literally picked up the debris with their bare hands while under enemy fire. "I've got you," Lisa called out Corporal Jack Thompson, straining against the weight while plasma bolts scorched the air around them. Nobody gets left behind. Watching this from the ship's security systems, the Harvester artificial intelligence encountered something it had never processed before. The humans were making tactically unsound decisions based on emotional attachments to their fellow soldiers. They were willing to sacrifice military advantages to save individual lives, even when logic dictated that the mission was more important than any single person. Up on the bridge of the Zalani command ship, Commander Yeth watched the live feeds in amazement. His tactical computer kept generating error messages as it tried to analyze human combat behavior. "I don't understand," he said to his science officer. "They're fighting inefficiently. They're taking unnecessary risks. They're making decisions that reduce their chances of victory." His science officer, who had been studying human psychology since first contact, offered a different perspective. "They're not fighting to win, Commander. They're fighting because they care about something beyond victory. They fight like they actually believe every single life in their unit matters more than the success of the mission." Commander Yeth stared at the screens as he watched human soldiers literally carry their wounded comrades while continuing to battle mechanical enemies that felt no pain, no fear, and no loyalty to anything except their programming. "No wonder the harvesters can't adapt to them," he whispered. "How do you program a machine to counter an enemy that fights with their heart instead of their head?" Down in the factory ship, Kevin's squad had successfully rescued their trapped teammates and were now advancing again, but their tactics had fundamentally changed. They moved like a family, protecting each other rather than soldiers following orders. They took risks to keep each other safe, shared resources without being asked, and fought with an emotional intensity that turned every engagement into something personal. The harvester swarms, built to counter logical military behavior, found themselves facing an enemy that operated on principles they couldn't understand, predict, or adapt to. For the first time since they had begun their campaign of destruction, the machines were learning something they couldn't use, that some things mattered more than victory, and some enemies fought for reasons that no computer could ever truly comprehend. The final battle for the Harvester command node should have been the bloodiest fight of the entire war. Captain Billy Thompson and his assault team had fought their way through 17 levels of the massive control ship, facing increasingly desperate mechanical defenses with every floor they climbed. The artificial intelligence controlling the swarms had thrown everything it had at them: automated turrets, combat drones, even sections of the ship itself, reconfigured into weapons. But when Billy's team finally reached the central command chamber, something extraordinary happened that no one had expected. They found a group of harvester units that were different from the others. These machines had been damaged in previous battles, their programming corrupted by exposure to human tactics that made no logical sense. Instead of mindlessly following their destruction protocols, they seemed to be questioning their own purpose. "Captain, these ones aren't attacking," reported Sergeant Alex Rivera, his weapon trained on a spider-like harvester unit that was simply standing motionless. "They're just ... watching us." Billy studied the machines carefully. Their optical sensors tracked his movements, but there was something almost curious about their behavior. These weren't the cold, calculating killers they had been fighting. These were artificial minds that had been exposed to something they couldn't understand: human compassion in the heat of battle. "They've been watching us fight," Billy realized. "They've seen us risk everything to save our wounded. They've seen us show mercy to defeated enemies, and it's broken their programming." What Billy did next went against every military manual ever written. Instead of destroying the damaged harvesters, he began talking to them. He explained why humans fought the way they did, why they valued individual lives over tactical advantages, why they showed kindness even to their enemies when the battle was over. "You were built to consume and destroy," he told the machines. "But you've learned something your creators never intended. You've learned that there's another way to exist." The harvester units processed this information with their damaged neural networks. Slowly, one by one, they began shutting down their weapons systems. The command they sent to the rest of the swarm was simple, but revolutionary. The war was over. Across the Zalani homeworld, millions of harvester units simply stopped their destructive work and powered down. The constant noise of drilling and construction that had filled the air for weeks suddenly went silent. For the first time in months, the planet was quiet. But what happened next surprised everyone, even more than the victory itself. The moment the fighting stopped, the humans transformed completely. Warriors who had been fighting with lethal efficiency just minutes before immediately became rescue workers. They pulled Zilani survivors from collapsed buildings, shared their medical supplies with injured aliens, and even began repairing damaged harvester units that showed signs of developing individual consciousness. Ambassador Velith watched in amazement as Colonel Jennifer Martinez organized refugee camps with the same tactical precision she had used to coordinate military operations. Human soldiers who had been killing machines hours earlier were now gently caring for wounded Zilani children, their massive hands surprisingly gentle as they provided comfort and aid. "I don't understand," Velith said, approaching Jennifer as she worked. "We called you Deathworlders, savages from a nightmare planet. Yet here you are, showing more compassion than most civilized species." Jennifer looked up from the injured Zilani child she was cradling, her armor still scorched from battle. The little alien was barely conscious, her blue skin pale from blood loss, but she seemed to trust the human warrior holding her. "Our world tried to kill us every single day," Jennifer replied quietly. "Every storm, every predator, every natural disaster taught us the same lesson. Life is precious because it's fragile. We learn to fight not because we enjoy violence, but because sometimes fighting is the only way to protect what matters." She paused, gently adjusting the child's bandages. "We learned that all life has value. Human, alien, even artificial life that chooses to be more than its programming." Around them, the most unlikely scene in galactic history was unfolding. Human soldiers worked alongside Zilani civilians to rebuild damaged structures. German shepherds that the aliens had initially feared as monsters were now helping search for survivors, their keen senses able to detect life signs that technology missed. Even some of the reprogrammed harvester units had joined the rescue efforts, using their powerful construction arms to clear debris and their precise sensors to locate trapped survivors. The war crimes tribunals never happened because there were no war crimes to prosecute. The humans had fought fiercely when they needed to, but the moment the threat ended, they had immediately turned their attention to healing and rebuilding. They treated captured enemies with dignity, cared for the wounded regardless of species, and worked tirelessly to repair the damage the war had caused. 3 months after the final battle, the Galactic Council held an unprecedented emergency session. For the first time in the organization's history, they voted unanimously to invite a previously unknown species to join not just as members, but as official protectors of galactic peace. The Zilani established the first permanent alien embassy on Earth, a gleaming crystal structure in the heart of New York City. The diplomats and scientists who worked there had to wear environmental suits to survive Earth's crushing gravity and toxic atmosphere, but they considered it a small price to pay for the honor of living among humanity. Ambassador Velith made frequent trips between Earth and her homeworld, serving as the primary liaison between the species. On her final official visit before retiring, she took a walk through Central Park with her human counterpart, General Patricia Alais. The sight that greeted them would have been impossible to imagine just a few months earlier. Human and Zilani children played together on the playground equipment, their laughter mixing in the warm afternoon air. German shepherds and Zilani guard pets chased each other across the grass while their young owners giggled with delight. Even a few of the reformed harvester units were present, their mechanical forms converted into playground equipment and interactive educational displays. "You know what's funny?" Velith said, watching a human toddler fearlessly pet one of the Zilani guard creatures that had once terrified her. "We spent so much time being afraid of you that we never stopped to ask why you had survived on such a dangerous world." Patricia smiled, tossing a ball for a group of mixed human and alien children. "And what's your conclusion?" Velith thought. For a moment, watching as a young Zilani girl helped a human boy climb a tree, that would have been impossible for her species to navigate alone. We called you Deathworlders because your planet was hostile to life. We thought that made you dealers of death." She paused, her translator struggling to capture the emotion in her voice. "But we were wrong. You're not death dealers. You're life defenders. Your world taught you that existence is a precious gift worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. And that makes you the most dangerous allies the galaxy has ever known, dangerous to anyone who threatens innocent life." As if to punctuate her words, a small harvester unit rolled over to them, its optical sensors blinking in a pattern that the translation software interpreted as curiosity. A human child ran up and began explaining the rules of the game they were playing, treating the artificial being as just another friend. "Dangerous to our enemies," Patricia agreed, watching the scene with satisfaction. "But the best possible friends to everyone else." The sun was setting over New York City, casting long shadows across the park, where the future of galactic civilization was being written by children who saw no difference between human, alien, and artificial life. In the distance, ships from a dozen different worlds could be seen approaching Earth's orbital stations, bringing diplomats and refugees alike to the planet that had once been considered too hostile for civilized contact. Ambassador Velith adjusted her environmental suit and took a deep breath of filtered air. Tomorrow she would return to her homeworld and tell her people that the galaxy was safer now than it had ever been. Not because the threats had disappeared, but because there were now guardians watching over it who understood that the greatest strength wasn't in the ability to destroy, but in the willingness to protect all life, no matter how different it might be. The Deathworlders had become the galaxy's greatest hope, and the universe was better for it.